through WhatsApp and Facebook, they are meeting partners. What the report shows, though, is that while it might be a digital door, it's still leading to the same trap, often resulting in girls being exploited, or their poverty situation being exploited for marriage. Sometimes what the girls told us is when their relationships are found out by their families, they're put under pressure to marry. Sometimes it gives them the illusion that they're making choices rather than their parents are, but then they find themselves in situations with that power imbalance and their poverty, meaning that they feel exploited, forced to drop out of school, or result in teen pregnancies, which impact the rest of their lives.
And what did your report find in terms of how much this is happening and where it's happening?
Now, we don't have great data about how many of these are occurring via social media, but we know that 12 million girls are married before the age of 18 around the world. That's 1 every 3 seconds. This report talked to 250 girls from 15 different countries, 14 countries where it's actually illegal to be married before you're 18, about their experience. And they largely told us that it was a depressing experience. A third of them told us that they were already divorced or separated from the relationships that they'd formed. 1 in 10 talked about the violence that they experienced at the hands of those relationships that were formed before they were 18. And many of them regretted losing the chance to be at school and felt isolated from their friends and felt a stigma in the society if they chose to opt out of marrying.
And you met a so-called child bride in Cambodia. What was her story?
I met a young woman in Cambodia. She actually wasn't married. She was a 21-year-old girl who had chosen not to marry and was a shining light in her community as someone who had studied to be a teacher. But at 21, she was considered ancient because almost everyone in her community was married at 14 or younger. So the problem in some of these contexts is people have no examples of anyone in their community who is not married, and they have no options available to them. So the example of the woman that I met in Cambodia was a young teacher who was acting as a role model and a shining light to both the boys and girls in the school that there were other options beyond getting married before the age of 18, and that you could be valued in the community by contributing economically beyond your bride price.
Also, Susanne, do vulnerable at-risk girls understand what online grooming is and what red flags to look out for?
Absolutely not. And in many of the contexts where we're talking about, there are few regulations or laws. The laws have not kept up with the digital forms in which people are now meeting. And certainly their parents' generation have no access to that technology and are not in a position to be able to teach them or guide them in that way. So you're finding girls being groomed, not being able to recognise those signs, putting themselves in extraordinary danger.
So how can the cycle of child marriage be broken?
Well, we've identified there are at least 3 prongs to this. One of them is you do need laws that enforce the fact that people shouldn't be married, girls shouldn't be married before they're aged 18, and that includes informal unions, and it means that those laws need to be enforced. And then the second one is keeping girls in school. The longer you can keep them in school, the less inclined they are to marry and the more options they have available to them to have other options in their life. But that means digital literacy as well, so they can understand the risks of the new social media platforms that they're engaging in. And the third one is really tackling the issue of the view of how girls are perceived in communities. And that means working with boys and parents and religious leaders to see that girls are valuable beyond being wives and mothers, and that they have value beyond that in their communities.
Susanne Legena, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ros.
If you or anyone you know was affected by this video, please contact Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636, Lifeline on 13 11 14, or Bravehearts on 1800 272 831.